Okay, in this video, I'm going to be continuing on inventories. In particular, I'm going to focus most of today's video on FIFO. No, LIFO and FIFO, weighted average periodic inventory. So that's what the bulk of the focus is going to be on today. There are a few items that I also need to cover before I get into periodic inventory methods. And that is when we have year-end cutoff transactions. So a business may have goods that are in transit on the way coming to them from their suppliers, or it may have goods on the way to their customers. And so in either case, when we do a physical inventory count, those goods that are in transit are not going to be in the physical count of either the buyer or the supplier or the customer. And so it's important to understand, when does the ownership of inventory transfer from the seller to the customer? And this is especially important around year end, because at year end, we need to record inventory as an asset, and that inventory account should include all of the inventory that the company owns, regardless of where it is. All right, so they may have inventory on the shelf or in the warehouse. They also may have inventory that is on the way coming to them from their suppliers, and they may have inventory that is on the way going to their customers. So that inventory that's in transit, who does it belong to? And here is the key. When it's FOB shipping point means that at the point of shipment, usually it's on the dock of the seller, then the title will transfer goods, the title, the owner of the goods, that goes from the buyer to the seller as soon as the goods are shipped. All right, so FedEx is coming to pick up some goods, and if it's FOB shipping point, then as soon as FedEx picks up the goods, they belong to the customer or the buyer in that transaction. All right, so during transit, the buyer owns the goods. And as a side note here, please note that if it's FOB shipping point, it is also the buyer's responsibility to ensure, and when I say that, have insurance on the goods while they are in transit. Otherwise, if the goods are damaged or lost, if you can't have recourse against FedEx or UPS, etc., it's the buyer's responsibility and the buyer's loss. All right, FOB destination, on the other hand, means that the title is going to transfer to the buyer when the goods reach their destination. All right, so in transit, then the seller will own the goods. So now what is important is that we need, or a business needs to know, if they bought goods from their supplier, were they FOB shipping point or FOB destination? Any goods that company A has purchased from a supplier, if it is FOB shipping point, they need to be included in company A's inventory, even though company A does not have them in their warehouse. All right, if it is company A has purchased from their supplier and it's FOB destination, then company A will not include those goods in their inventory, because while they are in transit, they are owned by the supplier. And then the opposite is true when we take a look at going from company A to its customers. So if it's FOB shipping point, then from the time that they are shipped, the customer owns them. They will not be included in company A's inventory. But if it's FOB destination, once the goods are shipped, they are still owned by Company A, and the ownership or the title does not transfer to Company B until those goods are delivered. All right. Now, so it's important then when we are to be aware of this so that at year end or at a period end, we are sure to include all the inventory that the company owns, even that inventory that they is still in transit, either from a supplier or to a customer. All right, now periodic inventory, and let me describe periodic inventory. Periodic inventory says that at the end of the period, we are going to take account of the inventory on hand, and that should probably include any goods that are in transit FOB shipping point that we are receiving. But to keep it simple, we'll assume that nothing is in transit. But periodic inventory says we are going to count up the inventory purchased during the month, do it at the end of the month. We are going to subtract away the inventory that is still on the shelf unsold. So the difference between what was available, that is to say the beginning inventory and all the purchases during the month, minus the goods sold, minus the ending inventory, and that will get us to the goods sold. Right? And we can do periodic inventory using LIFO, FIFO, weighted average. Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is take a look here at the weighted average method. This is the same information that we had on the previous video that I did. So just here is they've purchased, they had some beginning inventory, they had some purchases, they had some sales during the month of January, and the total sales were 135 units. There were 105 units in ending inventory. How do we get that? What was available for sale? All of these units here were available for sale, 240. So there were 105 left. So therefore, 240 minus 105 gives us 135 units that are sold. And now we have to figure out, well, what are the costs that we are going to assign to these 135 units that were sold? And what are the costs that we're going to assign to the units that are in ending inventory? All right, so weighted average cost per unit, and this is periodic. All right, so for the period, we're going to take the total cost of goods available for sale. And in this case here, the costs of goods available, which was the cost of the purchases, 180 plus 500 plus 270 plus 262.50, all adds up to 1212.50. This is the cost of goods available, and we're going to divide it by the units that were available. So there was 40, 10, 50, and 50, which is 240 units for sale. So therefore, the weighted average cost per unit will be 1212.50, and for 1212.50 they were able to acquire 240 units. So this means all right, 1212.5 divided by 240, and that gives us 5.05208. Now, I'm telling you here, the weighted average cost per unit, round it to 5 decimal places. So that's 5 numbers after the decimal point. The reason being because this is usually sufficient enough so we don't have rounding differences. All right, but the cost of goods sold and the cost of ending inventory will be rounded to the nearest penny. So our cost of goods sold, in this case, they sold 135 units. So we have 135 units, and we're going to multiply each of those units times 5.05208. And let's see, 5.05208 times 135. And this is going to be, and this number, we're going to round to the nearest penny. All right, so let me just emphasize here, round the cost of goods sold to the nearest penny. All right, so the only thing that we're going to round to 5 decimal places is going to be this weighted average cost per unit. Now, what is the cost of the ending inventory? And in this case here, we're going to take the number of units in the ending inventory and multiply it by the weighted average cost per unit. And the units in inventory at the end of the period were 105. So we have 105 units, and each unit has an average cost of $5.05208. And that will be equal to 105 times 5.05208. And that will give us $530. And I'm going to need to round this, 47 cents. So again, we're going to round the ending inventory to the nearest penny. Okay, so this is our cost of goods sold, 682.03, and this is the cost of inventory, 530.47. All right, so what's our gross profit? Well, I'm going to scroll back up here to this point here, and remember, so let me add a couple lines here, and this is the January sales. Alrighty. All right, so this is a January sales, and the January sales were $1,320 and no cents. Okay, so this amount here is the sales, and the sales is not going to change regardless of the method that we are using, LIFO, FIFO, periodic or perpetual, weighted average, etc. So with that, I'm going to go back down here to where we're doing the weighted average method, and our gross profit. Anyway, the gross profit is going to be equal to sales minus the cost of goods sold is equal to the gross profit. All right. That means then we had sales of 1,320 minus the cost of goods sold, and we're using the weighted average method. We said the cost of goods sold was 682.03. That would give us our gross profit of $637.97. Okay, so our gross profit is, as we just calculated. All right, so as you'll notice, I'm using the double underline whenever I get to the answer of a question. These are called the accounting lines, and that just is to point our attention to the fact that this is the answer to that question. All right, now the next question is, what is the gross profit percent? And the gross profit percent is going to be equal to the gross profit, which was $637.97. And we will have that divided by the cost of the sales, which was $1,320. All righty. All right, and that will give us, if we just put those numbers into our calculator or into Excel, 637.97 divided by 1320. And note that we're going to state it as a percentage. And as I said before, I encourage you to round to the to 2 decimal places. So the answer is 0.4833. And that is then going to be 48.33%. All right, so that's the percentage. I think, you multiply by 100 to get from here to here, but I think really only thing that you're doing here is moving the decimal place over and adding the percentage sign. Okay, now we have, again, the same information. So I'm just putting it here for it to be a little more visible. And, oh dear, sorry, I don't know why that jumped around. All right, and now we're going to talk about FIFO, periodic. And the nice thing is FIFO is FIFO. It does not make any difference if you're using periodic or perpetual. The cost of goods sold and the cost of the ending inventory will be the same. All right, so in order to save a little bit of time, I'm not going to go over that again. If you want to see how to use the FIFO method, go to the first video on inventories. Okay, now the next method that we have is the LIFO method. And alrighty, in the LIFO method periodic, this kind of is counterintuitive, but let me just explain. Okay, when we are allocating costs, and remember that LIFO is a costing method. LIFO is not necessarily, it's not telling us exactly which units went out the door, whether they were from an earlier or a later purchase, but it is going to assume that cost of goods sold, last in, first out. So for the units sold, we start at the cost of the units most recently purchased. Okay, so here we go. They sold 135 units. Remember, we did that computation up there already. And so, let's see. Okay, so now we're going to cost these units. And LIFO, we're going to be starting from the bottom, the most recent purchase. So even though these sales were made on the 3rd of January, we are going to cost them starting with the most recent costs at the end of the period. So here we go. The cost of the 135 units is going to be a little bit wrong. It is wrong. All right, we start off here with these 50 units, and these 50 units cost $525 each, giving us a total of $262.50. Okay. All right, now, so we took those 50, we still got to get to 135, so we'll go back to the next purchase. That was another 50 units, and those were at $540 for a total of $270. So how many more units do we need? Well, we've got to get to 135. We've already costed 100 of them, so we need 35 units more. And those 35 are going to come out of the 100 that were costed at $5 each. So we have then, 35 units at $5, and So 35 times 5 is equal to $175. Let me just verify this. All right, 135 times 5. No, 35 times 5. Excuse me, 35 units times $5 is $175. Excellent. So now we can compute our total units, and that is 135 units, which matches to the number of units that were sold. And then the total cost is going to be the sum total of these costs, 262.50, 270, 175, and that will give us 707.50. All righty, so now let me just do some double underlining here. And I want to do the same here. Oops, sorry about that. I thought I was repeating, but I guess I will do it by hand. Okay. Now, the cost of the ending inventory, there are 105 units that were left in ending inventory. And when we are computing the cost of the ending inventory, we're going to compute, let's see here, 105 units, but now first in, first out means that, last in, first out means that the first units in stayed in, or the cost of the first units stayed in. So now we're going to get to 105 units starting with the beginning inventory. So that's 40 units at $450, and that gives us $180. And then we have, well, how many units do we need? We need 65 more units to get to 105. So 105 minus 40 gives us 65 units. And those 65 units are going to be priced at the $5 price. So we have 65 units at $5. All right, so recall that of this 100 units, we're at 35 will be sold, or part of the cost of goods sold, and 65 will be part of the ending inventory. So that leaves us then with 65 times 5, or $325. And now we are just ready to do our totaling computations. 105 units, that matches the 105 here, and 105 there. And those units will have costed $505. Okay, so this is the cost of the ending inventory. All right, and remember I gave you that little trick step that we could do where we said we're going to add up the cost of goods sold plus the cost of the ending inventory and make sure that it equals the cost of goods available for sale. So the cost of the goods sold was $707.50 plus the cost of the ending inventory, which is $505. And when we add those up, we get $12.50. All right, so this is then our check. All right, now gross profit and gross profit percent. Again, as always, in our example here, the sales were $1,320. And I'm going to subtract away the cost of goods sold, which we computed to be $707.50. And that will give us then a gross profit of $612.50. All right, so this is equal to the gross profit. Now, what is the gross profit percent? Gross profit percent, excuse me. Okay, so now what we're going to take a look at here is the gross profit percent. And the gross profit percent is going to be 612.50 divided by 1320. And that will give us a gross profit rate of 46.40%. So please take a note that when we are computing inventory ratios, for example, gross profit percentages, that percentage is going to change depending upon what method of inventory costing that we use. So let's just take a quick review here. We have gross profit percent, and I'm going to say FIFO. Then we have gross profit percent LIFO, but this is perpetual. And then we have gross profit percent LIFO, and this will be periodic. And then we have the gross profit percent weighted average, and this is periodic. This one. There is also weighted average perpetual, but it's a little bit more of an advanced topic. So now what I'm going to do here is to record each of these gross profit ratios from the different methods. All right, so let's see. The first one that we did was FIFO perpetual. And note that the gross profit percent was, well, this is FIFO, and let me add here, this is periodic or perpetual, because as I said before, they are exactly the same. And all right, so this was 50.38%. All right, next one that we have here is LIFO perpetual. And let's see, last in, first out perpetual. And the, oh, we didn't compute it. So let me go back here and I'm just going to compute here. So the gross profit percent, which is going to be equal to 625 divided by 1,320. Okay, 625. And that is equal to 47.35%. All right, so now we have 47.35%. That's LIFO perpetual. Now the next method that we did was the weighted average periodic. And the weighted average periodic, the gross profit percent was 48.33%. And the LIFO periodic method, the gross profit percent was 46.40%. Now, please note, these are the same units, but there's different ways of costing them, and therefore, this will help us come up with different amounts of gross profit, different amounts of net income, different amounts of gross profit percent. And then carrying that through as well, then it will mean a difference in the net income percent or the profit margin. So when we are comparing company A to company B, if company A is using FIFO and company B is using a LIFO periodic, there's going to be two different ratios. We're comparing sort of like oranges, navel oranges with satsumas or whatever you call tangerines. Similar, but not quite the same. So that's going to require just to kind of give you an advanced look at some things, that when we're trying to compare two companies, if they use two different inventory methods, then we're going to have to make some adjustments and present those financial statements as if they were both using either FIFO or LIFO or weighted average. And usually what happens is we have sufficient information to be able to determine the FIFO inventory. All right, so that's it then for periodic inventories. And once this video processes, I will put the link up for you to be able to see it. Okay, just remember, homework and activity report, etc., are due Monday night. That is Monday the 10th. And the quiz, so you have quiz number 1, that is due. I'm giving you an extra day, Tuesday evening. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change it to Wednesday evening, because then that way gives me a little more chance to catch up with the grading.